The crystalline walls of Queen Zarlin's palace prison reflected Marcus Kane's image in fractured patterns that seemed to mirror his shattered hopes for peace between humanity and the Nethethan Empire. Through the transparent barriers that contained him, he could see the bustling activity of a royal court preparing for what would either be justice or the beginning of an interstellar war, depending on whether anyone believed his claims of innocence in the death of King Veldar. "Prisoner Kane," announced Guard Captain Thexera, her bioluminescent skin markings pulsing with the orange patterns that indicated professional duty mixed with personal distaste. "Queen Zarlin has scheduled your trial for tomorrow morning. Standard execution protocols will follow immediately upon verdict announcement." Marcus nodded while reviewing the evidence that would determine his fate, physical proof that seemed to condemn him despite his absolute certainty of innocence. He'd been found standing over the king's body during what should have been the final trade negotiation session, a human-manufactured weapon lying nearby despite his insistence that he'd never seen it before that moment. "Captain," he said carefully, "has the Queen considered the possibility that someone wanted the king dead and needed a convenient suspect to prevent proper investigation?" "The Queen has considered the evidence, which clearly indicates human involvement in His Majesty's assassination. Your trial is a formality required by law, not a genuine inquiry into guilt that has already been established." Marcus understood the political necessity that made his execution inevitable regardless of actual guilt. King Veldar's death had destroyed 5 years of careful diplomacy, and Queen Zarlin needed closure that would satisfy her people's demand for justice while preventing the war that would consume both civilizations. "Captain Thexera," he tried again, "if I wanted to kill the king, would I have used a weapon that immediately identified me as the assassin? Would I have remained in the room to be discovered with the body? Human logic is not Nethethan logic. Perhaps your species lacks the intelligence for sophisticated assassination methods." The insult was delivered with professional neutrality, though Marcus noticed that Thexera's skin markings showed yellow flickers that indicated uncertainty beneath her confident words. "Mr. Marcus," came a small voice from the corridor outside his cell, followed by the sound of running feet and hushed adult voices attempting to redirect someone who was clearly determined to reach the prisoner. Prince Kion appeared in the doorway despite the efforts of his escorts, the 6-year-old heir to the Nethethan throne carrying a rolled piece of drawing paper and wearing the expression of someone who had important business to conduct. "Your Highness," Captain Thexera said with exasperation that didn't quite mask her affection for the young prince, "you are not permitted to visit the prisoner. Queen Zarlin has been very clear about this restriction." "But I made him a picture," Kion protested, holding up his artwork with the pride that marked childhood creativity. "He's been sad, and pictures make sadness smaller." Marcus felt his heart clench as he looked at the small boy whose empathic abilities had apparently detected his emotional state despite the barriers that separated them. Prince Kion's pointed ears twitched with concentration as he studied Marcus's face, his enhanced perception allowing him to sense emotional truths that adults seemed determined to ignore. "Your Highness," Marcus said gently, "you should listen to Captain Thexera. Your mother has important reasons for her rules." "Mother is sad too," Kion said with the directness that made adults uncomfortable. "But your sadness is different from hers. Hers is angry sad. Yours is scared sad." The observation was so accurate that Marcus felt his composure crack slightly. A 6-year-old's empathic perception had identified emotional distinctions that trained interrogators had missed or chosen to ignore. "Prince Kion," Captain Thexera interrupted, "you must return to your quarters immediately. The prisoner is dangerous and not suitable for royal company." "He's not dangerous," Kion said with absolute certainty that came from empathic abilities rather than rational analysis. "He's just scared and lonely and missing his home." Marcus looked at the small boy whose perception cut through political necessity to recognize basic human emotions, understanding that Prince Kion saw him not as the enemy who had destroyed his family, but as someone who needed compassion. "Your Highness," Marcus said carefully, "tomorrow will be difficult for everyone. I want you to remember that sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices, even when those choices hurt people we care about. Are you going away tomorrow?" The question was asked with childhood directness that made euphemisms impossible. Marcus looked into eyes that held intelligence beyond the boy's years, recognizing that Prince Kion understood more about his situation than adults wanted to acknowledge. Yes, Your Highness. I'm going away tomorrow. Because of what happened to Father. Because people think I hurt your father, and they need someone to be responsible for what happened to him. But you didn't hurt Father, Kion said with emphatic certainty that made the surrounding adults uncomfortable. You're sad that he's gone. People who hurt other people don't feel sad about it afterward. Captain Thexera stepped forward to escort the young prince away from conversations that weren't appropriate for royal children, but Kion's next words stopped her mid-motion. Mr. Marcus, when you miss your home, do you think about the people you love? Every day, Your Highness. Father taught me that people who think about love aren't the same as people who think about hurting. He said you can tell the difference if you know how to listen with your heart instead of your ears. Marcus felt tears threatening as he realized that a 6-year-old boy understood his character better than any adult in the Netherson court. Prince Kion's empathic abilities had revealed truths that political necessity required everyone else to ignore. Your father was a wise man, Your Highness. I hope you grow up to be the same kind of leader he was. I will, Kion promised with childhood solemnity. And I'll remember that you were sad about Father, not happy. That has to mean something important. As Captain Thexera finally succeeded in escorting Prince Kion away from the prisoner, Marcus realized that his only ally in the entire Netherson Empire was a small boy whose testimony would never be heard in any court that mattered. Tomorrow would bring the trial that everyone knew was predetermined, but tonight Marcus held on to the knowledge that one person, even if that person was only 6 years old, believed in his innocence with the unshakable certainty that came from perceiving truth rather than political convenience. The palace corridors buzzed with the controlled chaos of preparation for what most courtiers privately acknowledged would be the most politically significant trial in Netherson history, with representatives from dozen worlds arriving to witness justice that would either satisfy honor or trigger the kind of interstellar conflict that could consume entire star systems. Marcus listened to the activity from his cell while reviewing everything he could remember about the day King Veldar died, searching for details that might reveal the truth about an assassination that had been designed to implicate him. The weapon found at the scene was definitely human manufacture, Guard Lieutenant Velnara reported during her routine security briefing, though her voice carried doubt that hadn't been present when his case seemed straightforward. But the energy signature doesn't match standard diplomatic security equipment. What does that suggest? Marcus asked, grateful that some guards were willing to engage with him as a person rather than simply a condemned prisoner. That someone obtained human weapons specifically for this assassination. Standard diplomatic protocol prohibits energy weapons during trade negotiations, so no human would have carried such devices legitimately. Marcus felt hope stirring as he recognized someone willing to consider evidence rather than political necessity. Lieutenant Velnara, who would have access to human weapons without going through official diplomatic channels. Palace security has confiscated items from previous diplomatic missions, including weapons that were declared but not returned to their owners. Or someone with off-world contacts could have obtained human technology through black market sources. And who has access to the confiscated weapons storage? Senior palace officials, including Trade Minister Kolvek, Defense Coordinator Sarlin, and Cultural Liaison Merthas. Marcus made mental notes about individuals who had both means and potential motives for framing him, though his investigation was hampered by the reality that tomorrow's trial would proceed regardless of any evidence he might uncover. Lieutenant, he said carefully, do you know if Prince Kion has been asking questions about what happened to his father? His Highness has been unusually interested in palace security procedures. Yesterday he asked me about how investigations work, and whether children are allowed to present evidence in royal courts. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of small footsteps in the corridor, followed by Prince Kion's voice engaged in what appeared to be serious discussion with his escort. But if someone made a mistake, Kion was saying with childhood logic, shouldn't we fix the mistake before something bad happens because of it? Your Highness, came the patient voice of Tutor Hexala, adult decisions involve complexities that children cannot fully understand. Your mother is handling your father's death according to proper procedures. But what if the procedures are wrong? Father always said that being right was more important than following rules when the rules hurt innocent people. Marcus felt his heart clench as he heard King Veldar's own philosophy being quoted by a 6-year-old who was trying to save someone he believed to be innocent. Prince Kion appeared in the doorway to Marcus's cell, carrying what appeared to be a folder of documents that seemed far too sophisticated for childhood reading. "Mr. Marcus," Kion said solemnly, "I've been learning about investigations. Did you know that sometimes people who seem guilty are actually innocent, and the real bad people hide by making everyone look at the wrong person?" "That's a very wise observation, Your Highness," Marcus replied, wondering what the young prince had discovered during his research into palace procedures. "I found some papers," Kion continued, opening his folder with the care that children reserve for treasured possessions. "They're about Father's trade meetings, and some people weren't happy about them." Lieutenant Velnara stepped closer, her professional curiosity overriding protocol restrictions about prisoners receiving visitor information. "What kind of papers, Your Highness?" she asked gently. "Letters between palace people and people from other worlds." They used big words, but they were talking about how Father's peace ideas were naive and dangerous for proper Netherson development. And they mentioned something about ensuring suitable consequences for such policies. Marcus felt his pulse accelerate as he recognized what Prince Kion might have uncovered. Evidence of the conspiracy he'd suspected but been unable to prove. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "where did you find these letters?" "In the archive room where Father kept his important papers. I'm allowed to go there because I'm learning to read royal documents for when I become king someday." "And you think these letters are connected to what happened to your father?" "The people writing them were angry about Father's friendship with humans. And the last letter was sent right before Father died." Lieutenant Velnara looked torn between duty to ignore evidence that complicated official narratives and professional obligation to investigate potential threats to royal security. "Prince Kion," she said slowly, "have you shown these documents to Queen Zaralyn?" "I tried, but Mother says I'm too young to understand political papers, and that thinking about Father's death isn't healthy for children. She told me to focus on my lessons instead of asking questions about grown-up problems." Marcus realized that the evidence that might save his life was being dismissed as childhood misunderstanding by a mother too grief-stricken to consider alternatives to the obvious suspect. "Your Highness," he said gently, "your mother is protecting you from difficult truths about the world. Sometimes adults make decisions that seem wrong to children because we're trying to shield you from things that might hurt you. But you're going to die tomorrow because everyone thinks you hurt Father," Kion said with devastating directness. "And I know you didn't do it, because people who hurt others don't feel the way you feel when you think about Father." "How do I feel when I think about your father?" "Sad and sorry and angry that someone took him away." "The same way I feel, except you're also scared because people don't believe you're telling the truth." The empathic accuracy of a 6-year-old's perception struck Marcus as more reliable than any formal investigation he'd witnessed during his imprisonment. "Prince Kion," Lieutenant Velnara said thoughtfully, "may I examine the documents you found? Not to take them away, but to understand what they might mean for palace security." Kion carefully showed her the letters he discovered, his small fingers tracing words that he could read but didn't fully comprehend. Marcus watched Velnara's expression change from professional curiosity to genuine alarm as she processed evidence of conspiracy that extended to the highest levels of Netherson government. "These documents," she said quietly, "suggest coordination between palace officials and unknown off-world contacts about neutralizing King Veldar's dangerous policies and ensuring the human delegation becomes a suitable focus for appropriate consequences." "Which means?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. "Which means you may have been framed by people who wanted the king dead and needed someone to blame for his assassination." Prince Kion looked between the two adults with satisfaction that came from finally finding someone who took his discovery seriously. "So we can save Mr. Marcus?" he asked hopefully. "We can try," Lieutenant Velnara said, though her expression showed doubt about whether evidence discovered by a 6-year-old would be sufficient to halt political necessity that demanded immediate closure to a case that threatened interstellar war. The eve of Marcus's execution brought a flurry of political activity as various factions prepared for the morning's trial, though most participants understood that the verdict had been predetermined by necessity rather than evidence. Lieutenant Velnara spent the day attempting to verify Prince Kion's documentary discoveries through proper investigative channels, only to encounter resistance from the very palace officials whose correspondence suggested involvement in King Velvar's assassination. Trade Minister Kolvek insists that all official correspondence is classified for security purposes, she reported to Marcus during what would be their final conversation. Defense Coordinator Sarlin claims that any documents Prince Kion found must be forgeries created by human sympathizers attempting to disrupt the investigation. And Cultural Liaison Merthaz has mysteriously departed on urgent diplomatic business to the outer colonies, leaving no forwarding information about when he might return. Marcus nodded grimly, recognizing the pattern of evidence suppression that confirmed his suspicions about conspiracy extending through multiple levels of palace authority. Lieutenant Velnara, he said quietly, I want you to know that your willingness to investigate has meant everything to me. Even if it doesn't change tomorrow's outcome, you've proven that someone cared enough about truth to look beyond the obvious answer. Mr. Kane, she replied formally, though her bioluminescent markings showed emotional distress, I believe you are innocent of King Velvar's murder. I also believe that proving your innocence would expose corruption that threatens the stability of the realm. Which means my execution serves political stability even if it fails to serve justice. Unfortunately, yes. Their conversation was interrupted by commotion in the corridor outside, raised voices and the sound of someone moving with determined purpose despite obvious attempts to redirect them. Your Highness, you cannot visit the prisoner tonight, came Tutor Hexala's voice, strained with exhaustion from what had apparently been an ongoing argument. Queen Zaralyn has specifically forbidden any contact before tomorrow's proceedings. But I have to tell him something important, Prince Kion's voice replied with desperate urgency. He needs to know that someone believes him before tomorrow happens. Your Highness, your belief doesn't change the legal proceedings that must occur. Then the legal proceedings are wrong. The declaration carried such vehement certainty that Marcus felt tears threatening as he recognized a 6-year-old's absolute conviction in his innocence. Prince Kion appeared in his doorway despite Tutor Hexala's obvious distress, carrying what appeared to be a carefully prepared speech written in the large, careful letters that marked childhood composition. Mr. Marcus, he said solemnly, I wrote down everything I want to say to you, because sometimes when I'm sad I forget important words. I'd be honored to hear what you've written, Your Highness. Kion unfolded his paper with ceremonial precision, clearing his throat with the gravity that children bring to formal occasions. Dear Mr. Marcus, he read carefully, tomorrow the grown-ups are going to do something that I think is wrong, but I can't stop them because I'm only 6 and nobody listens to children about important things. But I want you to know that I believe you didn't hurt Father, and that Father would believe you too if he was still here to use his heart instead of just his eyes. Marcus felt his composure cracking as he listened to words that carried more wisdom than any adult testimony he'd heard during his imprisonment. I know you miss your home and your people, Kion continued, the same way I miss Father and the way things used to be before everything became sad and angry. But missing people and being sad about them is different from hurting them, and anyone who knows how to feel the difference should understand that you're good, not bad. Your Highness, Marcus managed, your father would be very proud of the person you're becoming. I hope so. And I hope that wherever you go tomorrow, you remember that someone knew you were telling the truth, even if that someone was too little to help you prove it. Prince Kion folded his letter carefully and approached the barrier that separated them, pressing his small hand against the crystalline surface in the closest approximation to comfort he could offer. Mr. Marcus, when I grow up and become king, I'm going to make sure that people listen to truth instead of just what seems easy to believe. And I'm going to remember you whenever I have to make hard decisions about what's right. Marcus placed his own hand against the barrier, aligning it with Kion's in a gesture that transcended species differences to acknowledge the bond between someone facing death and someone too young to prevent it. Your Highness, he said softly, you've already shown more wisdom and courage than most adults demonstrate in their entire lives. The galaxy will be fortunate to have you as a leader someday. Will you think about me tomorrow, when you're scared? I'll think about you every moment, Your Highness. And I'll be grateful that I got to meet someone who proved that kindness and truth still exist in the universe. Tutor Hexala finally succeeded in escorting Prince Kion away from the prisoner, though Marcus could hear the boy's voice echoing through the corridors as he continued protesting the injustice of circumstances beyond his control. Lieutenant Velnara remained after the others departed, her expression showing the conflict between professional duty and personal conviction. Mr. Kane, she said quietly, Prince Kion's empathic abilities are remarkably advanced for his age. Royal children often demonstrate enhanced perception, but his accuracy in reading emotional truth is extraordinary. Are you saying his assessment of my innocence carries weight beyond childhood intuition? I'm saying that Nethissan empathic abilities have been used as evidence in legal proceedings for centuries. Prince Kion's perception of your emotional patterns would be considered reliable testimony if you were old enough for his observations to be admitted in court. Marcus felt bitter irony at the knowledge that his most credible witness was legally ineligible to testify on his behalf. Then I'll die knowing that the one person most qualified to judge my character believed in my innocence. Mr. Kane, Lieutenant Velnara said with sudden decision, Prince Kion may not be able to testify officially, but his royal status grants him access to tomorrow's proceedings. If he chooses to speak, protocol requires that his words be heard, even if they cannot be considered formal evidence. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that sometimes the most powerful testimony comes not from legal procedures, but from unexpected moments when truth breaks through political necessity. As Marcus prepared for what would likely be his final night alive, he held on to the hope that a 6-year-old's unwavering belief in his innocence might somehow matter when morning brought the trial that everyone expected to end with his execution. The royal throne room had been transformed into a court of final judgment, with representatives from across the galaxy gathering to witness justice that would either satisfy Nethissan honor or trigger the interstellar war that both species had worked desperately to avoid. Queen Zaralyn sat upon her crystalline throne wearing ceremonial robes that reflected her bioluminescent grief patterns, while Marcus stood in the defendant's circle knowing that his life would end within the hour regardless of any testimony he might offer. Marcus Kane of the Human Colonial Authority, Queen Zaralyn pronounced with voice that carried throughout the vast chamber, you stand accused of the assassination of King Veldar, sovereign of the Nethissan Empire and my beloved husband. How do you answer these charges? Your Majesty, Marcus replied with dignity that came from accepting death while maintaining his principles, I am innocent of King Veldar's murder. I grieve his loss as deeply as anyone in this chamber, and I would give my life to undo the tragedy that has befallen your family and our peoples. The evidence demonstrates otherwise. You were found with the murder weapon, standing over the king's body, with no witnesses to support claims of innocence. The evidence demonstrates that I was framed by individuals who wanted the king dead and needed a convenient suspect to prevent proper investigation of their conspiracy. Queen Zaralyn's bioluminescent patterns flared with anger at the suggestion that Nethissan citizens might be responsible for regicide. You dare accuse my people of treason while standing trial for murder? Your Majesty, I accuse specific individuals of using my presence as cover for their assassination of a leader whose policies they opposed. The Real killers remain free while you execute the scapegoat they selected. Enough, the Queen declared, rising from her throne with ceremonial authority. Your guilt is established by evidence that admits no alternative interpretation. I hereby sentence you to immediate execution for the murder of King Veldar. The pronouncement created satisfied murmurs from Nethissan nobles and horrified silence from human diplomatic observers, all of whom understood that Marcus's death would end one crisis while potentially creating another. Queen Zaralyn descended from her throne carrying the ceremonial blade that would deliver justice according to ancient Nethissan tradition, her movement deliberate and final as she approached the defendant who had destroyed her family and threatened the stability of her realm. Marcus Kane, she said formally, do you have final words before sentence is carried out? Your Majesty, Marcus replied, maintaining eye contact with the woman who would kill him in moments, I am sorry for your loss. King Veldar was a great leader whose vision of peace between our peoples deserved better than the conspiracy that destroyed him. I hope my death brings you the closure you seek, and that someday you will discover the truth about who really took your husband from you. Queen Zaralyn raised the ceremonial blade above Marcus's neck, her grief and rage focused into the moment of vengeance that would end months of political crisis with decisive action. "Don't hurt him." The desperate cry shattered the ceremony's solemnity as Prince Kion broke free from his guardians and rushed toward the execution circle, his small form throwing itself between his mother and the human she was about to kill. "Kion, step away immediately," Queen Zaralyn commanded, though her voice showed shock at her son's unprecedented intervention. "No." Kion declared with 6-year-old determination, his arms wrapped around Marcus in protective embrace. "He didn't hurt father. He's sad about father, not happy. People who kill don't feel sad about it afterward." "Prince Kion," the queen said more gently, "you don't understand the complexities of adult justice. Mr. Kane must face consequences for his actions." "But he didn't do it." Kion insisted, his empathic certainty creating emotional resonance that filled the chamber with unexpected conviction. "I can feel that he's telling the truth. His heart hurts the same way mine does when I think about father being gone." The throne room fell into stunned silence as hundreds of witnesses processed the unprecedented sight of royal heir defying his mother to protect the condemned prisoner. "Kion," Queen Zaralyn said, her voice cracking slightly, "you must trust that I am doing what is necessary for our people." "What's necessary is finding the real people who hurt father," Kion replied with logic that pierced through political necessity to moral truth. "I found letters, mother. Letters from palace people talking to outside people about how father's peace ideas were dangerous and needed to stop. Letters can be forged, my son. Children don't understand how evidence works in criminal cases. But children understand how feelings work." Kion declared, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "And Mr. Marcus feels like someone who protects people, not someone who hurts them." Queen Zaralyn stared at her son, who continued clinging to Marcus with absolute determination despite being surrounded by adults who could easily remove him from the execution circle. "Your Majesty," Marcus said quietly, "Prince Kion's empathic abilities have allowed him to perceive emotional truths that formal investigation has overlooked. Perhaps his judgment deserves consideration before you complete irreversible justice. A child's empathic impressions cannot override physical evidence and political necessity." "Mother," Kion said with desperate urgency, "remember what father taught me about listening with my heart instead of my ears? Mr. Marcus's heart tells the truth even when his words can't prove it." Queen Zaralyn looked at her son, whose empathic abilities had always been remarkably accurate, then at Marcus, whose emotional patterns had apparently convinced a 6-year-old of his complete innocence. "Lieutenant Velnara," she called suddenly, "present the documentary evidence that Prince Kion discovered in the royal archives." "Your Majesty," Lieutenant Velnara stepped forward with the letters Kion had found. "These communications suggest coordination between palace officials and off-world contacts regarding neutralizing King Veldar's policies and ensuring the human delegation becomes a suitable focus for appropriate consequences." Queen Zaralyn examined the documents while Prince Kion maintained his protective embrace of Marcus, the small boy's determination creating a tableau that forced everyone present to confront the possibility that justice was about to become judicial murder. "These letters," the Queen said slowly, "indicate that Trade Minister Kolvek, Defense Coordinator Sarlin, and Cultural Liaison Merthas were corresponding with unknown parties about opposing my husband's peace initiatives. The final communication was sent the day before King Veldar's death," Lieutenant Velnara added. "It confirms arrangements have been finalized and the human scapegoat will be positioned appropriately." Queen Zaralyn's bioluminescent patterns shifted from grief-rage to something approaching horror as she processed evidence that her husband's murder had been orchestrated by trusted advisors who had used her desire for vengeance to conceal their treason. "Kion," she said softly, kneeling to her son's eye level while still holding the ceremonial blade, "your empathic abilities told you that Mr. Kane was innocent?" "Yes, mother. He feels like someone who saves people, not someone who hurts them. And he feels sad about father the same way we do, like someone who lost a friend, not like someone who wanted father to be gone." Queen Zaralyn looked at Marcus, who remained motionless to avoid startling the child whose body shielded him from execution. Mr. Kane, she said carefully, my son's empathic perception has never been wrong about emotional truth. If he believes you are innocent, then I must consider that my grief has blinded me to evidence that contradicts obvious conclusions. Your Majesty, Marcus replied gently, I understand the need for closure after such a devastating loss. If my death serves your people's need for justice, I accept that necessity. But if there's any possibility that the Real killers remain unpunished while you execute an innocent man, then Prince Kion's courage in speaking truth deserves your consideration. Guards, Queen Zaralyn commanded suddenly, arrest Trade Minister Kolvek, Defense Coordinator Sarlin, and any associates who might have been involved in the conspiracy these letters reveal. The investigation into my husband's death will be reopened immediately. The throne room erupted in shocked voices as the implications of halted execution and revealed conspiracy spread through an assembly that had expected straightforward closure rather than explosive political revelation. Mother, Prince Kion said, finally releasing his protective hold on Marcus, does this mean Mr. Kane won't die today? It means, my son, that you have prevented a terrible injustice through courage that shames every adult in this chamber. Queen Zaralyn helped her son to his feet, then addressed Marcus directly. Mr. Kane, I owe you an apology that can never adequately address the wrong I nearly committed. Your Majesty, you owe me nothing. You acted according to evidence that was deliberately planted to frame me. The real debt is owed by all of us to Prince Kion, whose wisdom and courage prevented a mistake that would have served the murderer's purposes perfectly. Queen Zaralyn looked at her 6-year-old son, who had saved an innocent life through simple refusal to accept injustice when he had the power to oppose it. Kion, she said with maternal pride that replaced royal formality, your father would be proud of the man you are becoming. You have shown more wisdom today than any advisor in my court. I just listened with my heart like father taught me, Kion replied with childhood modesty. Mr. Kane needed someone to believe him when nobody else would. 3 months later, the conspiracy trials revealed the full scope of the plot that had killed King Veldar and nearly triggered interstellar war through Marcus's execution. The real murderers faced justice while Marcus returned to diplomatic service with enhanced authority to negotiate the peace treaties that King Veldar had died trying to achieve. Prince Kion continued his education with additional lessons in empathic justice, preparing for future leadership guided by the principle that truth perceived with emotional wisdom often matters more than evidence that serves political convenience. The galaxy gained a new model for interspecies cooperation, built on the foundation of a 6-year-old's absolute certainty that protecting innocent people was more important than following rules that produced wrong outcomes. And Marcus Kane carried with him always the memory of small arms wrapped around him in protection, and a child's voice declaring that sometimes the most important testimony comes not from legal procedures, but from hearts brave enough to speak truth when silence would be safer.